The girl's hand shot out and grabbed Milo's wrist before he could
Help
walk
my
past.
mother!
Her
Help
grip
her!
was surprisingly strong for a 7-year-old, her fingernails digging into his skin like she was drowning and he was the last piece of driftwood in a storm. Rain hammered the marble pathway around them, pooling at the base of the headstone that read, Eleanor Winthrop, beloved wife and mother. But it was the girl's eyes that stopped him cold. Not grief, not sadness. Terror, pure animal terror. "She's not here," Lila Winthrop whispered. 3 words, the first 3 words she'd spoken in 517 days, and she said them while staring at her mother's grave like it was a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Milo Reyes had been the gardener at Blackthorn Estate for exactly 6 weeks. 6 weeks of trimming hedges that cost more than his childhood home. 6 weeks of nodding at security guards who looked through him like glass. 6 weeks of watching the billionaire's mute daughter wander the grounds like a ghost trapped between worlds. He wasn't supposed to engage with the family. That was rule number 1. Rule number 2 was don't ask questions. Rule number 3 was remember that you're invisible, replaceable, and utterly insignificant to the people who sign your checks. But when a child who hasn't spoken in over a year suddenly grabs your arm and speaks, you don't just walk away. "What do you mean?" Milo asked, dropping to one knee so he could meet her eyes. The rain soaked through his work pants instantly. "Lila, what do you mean she's not here?" The girl's mouth opened, then closed. Her free hand flew to her throat, pressing against it like she was trying to push words out of a locked door. Her face twisted with effort, with pain, with something that looked horrifyingly like suffocation. Then footsteps, sharp, purposeful, expensive. "Lila." The voice belonged to Dr. Eris Forn, lead therapist from the Vesper Institute. He appeared from behind a mausoleum like a shadow taking human form, his white coat pristine despite the downpour. Milo watched the girl's entire body change. Her spine straightened, her hand dropped from her throat, her face went blank, empty, like someone had reached inside and switched off every emotion. "And you," Thorne said, turning those pale gray eyes on Milo, "shouldn't you be working?" You were just leaving." It wasn't a question. Milo stood. His knees ached. His chest ached worse. He wanted to say something, do something, but the words that had abandoned Lila seemed to have infected him too. He walked away. But he didn't forget. That night, Milo couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Lila's eyes, kept feeling her fingers on his wrist, kept hearing those 3 impossible words. "She's not here." What did that mean? Was it metaphorical? Was the child saying her mother's spirit wasn't present, that grief had stolen the person she loved? Or was it literal? He sat up in his narrow bed in the staff quarters and pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking. They'd been shaking since Sophia died 3 years ago on an operating table while he waited in a plastic chair, drinking vending machine coffee, completely unaware that his entire world was ending 2 floors above him. The doctors called it a complication, a rare reaction to the anesthesia. They'd handed him forms and he'd signed them with numb fingers, never reading the fine print, never asking the questions that might have revealed the truth. His silence cost him his daughter. He wouldn't let it cost someone else theirs. Milo typed Eleanor Winthrop accident into the search bar and started reading. The official story was simple. Car accident on a rainy night, vehicle went off the road, body recovered from the wreckage, funeral held 3 days later at Blackthorn Estate, case closed, tragedy complete. But the deeper he dug, the stranger things got. The accident occurred 2 miles from the funeral home, on a road Eleanor had no reason to be traveling. The coroner's preliminary report mentioned unexplained bruising on the anterior neck before the final cause of death was listed as traumatic asphyxiation due to vehicular impact. The police investigation lasted exactly 4 days before being closed with no further action. 4 days for the death of a billionaire's wife? Milo's hands stopped shaking. They went cold instead. He'd seen that phrase before. Unexplained bruising on the neck. It had appeared in Sophia's medical records too, buried in a supplementary note he'd only discovered months later, long after the funeral, long after the settlement check, long after his questions had become too late to matter. The next morning, Milo watched. He watched how the Vesper Institute staff surrounded Lila like a protective barrier that was somehow more like a prison. He watched how they made her wear high-collared blouses even in the summer heat. He watched how Dr. Thorne conducted twice-weekly neurological assessments but never brought any imaging equipment. And he watched how Lila winced every time she turned her head to the left. "You're staring again," Marcus said, the head groundskeeper, a man whose job mostly consisted of telling other people what to do. "The girl's got problems, not your business." "She's in pain," Milo said. "She's grieving." "No," Milo said slowly, "that's not grief. I know what grief looks like. That's something else." Marcus grabbed his arm, not gently. "Listen to me. Julian Winthrop pays our salaries. The Vesper Institute handles her daughter. You handle the roses, understand?" Milo understood perfectly. He just didn't care anymore. That night, Milo slipped a voice recorder in the garden swing where Lila liked to sit. The next day, he retrieved it and listened to 3 hours of silence, punctuated by soft humming and one phrase repeated over and over in a voice barely above a breath. "Mama hurt. Mama hurt. Mama hurt." Now stop right here. If this story is already making your heart race, if you're already suspicious of Dr. Thorne and wondering what happened to Eleanor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is about to take a turn that I promise you won't see coming. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what happens next. 3 days later, Milo made his move. The east wing of Blackthorn Estate was off limits to staff. Everyone knew that. But Milo had spent 6 weeks mapping the property, learning its rhythms, memorizing which security cameras had blind spots and which doors had faulty locks. At midnight, he slipped through a service entrance and made his way down a corridor that smelled of lemon polish and secrets. The door he was looking for was disguised as a linen closet. He'd seen Thorne emerging from it twice, both times looking over his shoulder like a man with something to hide. The lock required a fingerprint, but the scanner was old, and Milo had worked enough service jobs to know that old scanners could be fooled with a strip of tape and a prayer. It took 4 tries, but the door clicked open. What he found inside made his stomach turn. It was a medical room, small, sterile, windowless. A reclining chair with restraints sat in the center, surrounded by monitors and equipment he didn't recognize. On a metal tray beside it lay a cervical brace, a syringe filled with clear liquid, and a folder. The folder was labeled Project Larkspur, Vocal Suppression Protocol. Milo's hands were shaking again as he opened it. The first page showed a detailed diagram of the human nervous system, with one area circled in red ink, the vagus nerve. Handwritten notes in the margin read, "Compression stable, vocal suppression total. Proceed with Phase 3. Beneath that, a schedule, Lila's name, dates going back 17 months. They weren't treating her trauma, they were causing it. Someone was physically preventing Lila from speaking, compressing her vagus nerve, manipulating her vocal function, keeping her silent through medical intervention disguised as therapy. Milo grabbed his phone, snapped pictures of everything, and beep, beep, beep. Motion sensor. He'd missed a motion sensor. The alarm screamed through the corridor as Milo ran. He burst through the service entrance, sprinted across the rain-slick lawn, and didn't stop until he reached the staff quarters, his lungs burning and his mind spinning. He had proof, he had evidence, but what was he supposed to do with it? Go to the police? The same police who'd closed Eleanor's case in 4 days? Go to the media? And say what? That he, a gardener with a dead daughter and a history of depression, had stumbled onto a conspiracy involving one of the richest men in the country? They'd destroy him. They'd call him crazy, obsessed, grief-stricken. They'd bury him just like they'd buried the truth about Eleanor. He needed more.
The next morning, Lila was gone. "Extended therapy session," the housekeeper said when Milo asked. The Vesper team felt she needed more intensive intervention. But Milo saw the black van idling at the rear gate, saw the way the driver kept checking his mirrors, saw how the rear doors hung open like a mouth waiting to swallow. He ran. "Lila!" His voice tore across the grounds, raw and desperate. "Lila!" Her face appeared in the van's window, pale, terrified, her palm pressed flat against the glass. Julian Winthrop stepped into his path. The tech billionaire looked nothing like his magazine photos. Up close, he was hollow, gaunt. His eyes had the dead quality of a man who'd traded his soul for something and no longer remembered what. "Stop," Julian said. 2 security guards flanked him, hands on their belts. "Stop right there." "Sir, your daughter." "My daughter is receiving the care she needs." Julian's voice was eerily calm. "You're fired, Mr. Reyes. You have 1 hour to collect your belongings. If you come near this property again, if you contact anyone about what you think you saw, I will have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. I will destroy your reputation. I will make sure no one ever believes a word you say." The van's engine revved. Milo looked past Julian to the window where Lila's face still pressed against the glass. As he watched, she raised her other hand and tapped her throat 3 times. Once, twice, 3 times. A signal, a code, a plea that said, "Don't give up on me." The van pulled away. Milo stood in the rain and watched it disappear. Then he went to find the truth. It took him 4 days to track the van, 4 days of sleepless nights, dead-end leads, and a growing certainty that he was being watched. The black sedan appeared twice in his rear view before he learned to take different routes, park in different locations, never sleep in the same place twice. Finally, he found it. A private medical facility 40 miles outside the city, registered under a shell company that traced back to the Vesper Institute. Getting inside was almost too easy. A janitor's uniform, a confident stride, a clipboard. People saw what they expected to see, and nobody expected a threat from a middle-aged man with a mop. He found Lila in a basement room, strapped to a reclining chair, Dr. Thorne standing over her with a syringe. "Time for your treatment, Lila. You know this is for your own good. Your father wants you healthy, happy, quiet." "Get away from her." Thorne spun. His face cycled through surprise, recognition, and finally a cold amusement that Milo's skin crawled. "The gardener, I should have known. Men like you with your savior complexes, your dead children, your desperate need to matter. You don't understand what you are interfering with. You don't understand what she is. She's a child. She's a witness." Thorne smiled. "She saw something she shouldn't have, and as long as she can speak, she's a threat to everything her father has built. We're not hurting her, Mr. Reyes. We're protecting her, protecting the family, protecting the truth." "Whose truth?" "The only truth that matters, the one that keeps the world running smoothly." Milo moved before he could think. He tackled Thorne, sending them both crashing into the equipment. Monitors fell, glass shattered. Thorne clawed at his face, but Milo was bigger, angrier, fueled by 3 years of compressed grief and 6 weeks of building rage. He knocked Thorne unconscious with a single punch. Then he freed Lila. "Can you walk?" he asked, pulling at her restraints. She nodded, her eyes huge in her pale face. "Then we need to go, now." As he lifted her from the chair, his hand brushed something taped under the seat, a flash drive, hidden where no one would think to look. He pocketed it and ran. They reached a motel 3 hours later, a roach-infested place with stained carpets and a clerk who didn't ask questions. Milo bolted the door, checked the windows twice, then finally plugged the flash drive into his laptop. The first file was video, security footage from Blackthorn Estate, time-stamped the night of Eleanor's death. Milo pressed play. The garden appeared in grainy night vision green. Two figures stood by the fountain, Julian Winthrop and Eleanor Winthrop. They were arguing. Their voices were muffled, but their body language screamed hostility. Eleanor was holding something, a USB drive, just like the one Milo now held. "Give it to me," Julian said, grabbing her arm. "No, people need to know what the Institute is doing, what you're funding. I won't let you silence." He shoved her, hard. Eleanor stumbled backward. Her head struck the edge of the stone fountain with a sound that Milo would never forget. A wet crack, a final silence. She didn't move. Julian stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds. Then he pulled out his phone. "It's done. She fell. No, she's not breathing. I need a cleanup team. Now." The footage cut to a view of the rose arbor, and there, hidden among the blooms, her face illuminated by moonlight, stood Lila, watching, seeing everything. A 7-year-old girl witnessing her father kill her mother. The final file was different, not security footage, a live feed from what looked like a hospital room. Eleanor Winthrop sat in a bed, but barely. Her eyes were vacant. Bandages wrapped her throat. When she opened her mouth, the sound that came out was mechanical, distorted, inhuman.
Asset secured. Daughter compliant. Vocal modification successful. Proceed with neural conditioning. Eleanor wasn't dead. She was imprisoned. And Lila hadn't been grieving all these months. She'd been warning anyone who would listen. Mama hurt. Mama hurt. Mama hurt. Milo looked at the girl sitting on the motel bed. She was watching him with those 2 old eyes, waiting to see if he would finally understand. "He hurt, Mama," she mouthed. "I saw." "I know." Milo's voice cracked. "I believe you, and I'm going to get her back." The next 48 hours moved with the frantic energy of a nightmare you can't wake from. Milo contacted Sarah Chen, a journalist he'd known before Sophia died, back when he was still someone who had friends and connections and a life worth living. "I need you to run a story," he said, "but I need proof first." "What kind of proof?" "Eleanor Winthrop is alive." Silence on the line. Then, "You're serious." "Dead serious. Julian killed her, or tried. She's being held at a Vesper Institute facility. I have footage, documents, everything, but I need to get her out before they move her. Can you be ready?" "If this is real, yes, I'll be ready." It wasn't much of a plan. Break into Blackthorn Estate, find where they'd moved Eleanor, get her to safety, and pray the story went viral before Julian's lawyers could bury it. But Milo knew the grounds. He knew the tunnels, the blind spots, the rhythm of the guards. And he knew something else now, something he'd discovered while reviewing the Project Larkspur files. Lila wasn't just conditioned to stay silent, she was conditioned to obey. Every door in the estate was linked to her biometrics, her fingerprints, her retinal scan. The system was designed so she could never escape, but also so she could never be locked out. They'd made her part of the machine, a living key to every secret they wanted to hide. If Milo could get her back inside, she could open doors he never could. Midnight at Blackthorn Estate. Rain hammered the grounds like a judgment. Milo scaled the perimeter wall with Lila on his back, her arms wrapped tight around his neck, her breath warm against his ear. "You're brave, you know that? The bravest person I've ever met." She said nothing, but her arms squeezed tighter. They made it through the service tunnels without incident. The estate was quiet, most of the staff dismissed for the night. Only security remained, and they were focused on the perimeter, not the forgotten passages beneath their feet. The east wing door appeared ahead, the same door Milo had broken into before, the same lock he'd fooled with tape and luck. But this time he had something better. "Lila,"
He knelt so she could reach the scanner. "I need you to open it. Can you do that?" She stared at the panel like it was a snake waiting to strike. Her whole body trembled. "I know they trained you to obey. I know they made you feel like you had no choice, but you do have a choice. You always did. And right now, I need you to choose your mom. Can you do that?" Lila placed her palm on the scanner. It beeped green. Inside, the medical room had been transformed. More equipment, more monitors, and on the largest screen, a live feed of Eleanor's cell, no longer at the outside facility, but here, somewhere in the estate itself. They'd brought her home, hidden her right under Julian's roof. "She's in the basement, the old wine cellar. It has to be." They moved deeper into the estate, past portraits of ancestors with cold eyes, past rooms filled with furniture that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The cellar door was hidden behind a bookcase, a cliché that somehow made it worse. The bookcase swung open to Lila's touch, and there, at the bottom of a narrow staircase, they found her. Eleanor Winthrop lay on a hospital bed, surrounded by machines. Her eyes were closed, her face gaunt, her throat still wrapped in bandages. But when Milo touched her hand, they opened. "Lila?" The word came out wrong, distorted by whatever they'd done to her voice box, but the recognition was there. The love was there. "Mama!" Lila's voice cracked, raw and unused but real. "Mama, I found you." Well, isn't this touching? Julian Winthrop stood at the top of the stairs, gun in hand. Dr. Thorne lurked behind him, face bruised from their earlier encounter, eyes burning with hatred. "You should have taken the severance package, Milo. Should have walked away when you had the chance. Now you've forced my hand." "Let them go." Milo stepped in front of Lila and Eleanor. "This is over, Julian. I have copies of everything, the footage, the files, the whole Project Larkspur archive. If anything happens to us, it goes public within the hour." Julian laughed. It was an empty sound, devoid of anything human. "You think I'm afraid of exposure? I own the media that would cover this story. I own the politicians who would investigate this case. I own the judges who would hear the case. This isn't a movie, Gardner. The good guys don't win because they're right. They lose because they're poor." He raised the gun. "But I'll tell you what, I'm feeling generous. Walk away now, just you, alone, and I'll let you live. I'll even make sure your story never gets traced back to you. Clean break, new start. All you have to do is leave my wife and daughter here, where they belong." Milo looked at Lila, at her trembling hands, at her terrified eyes, at the 3 years of silence and suffering written across her face. Then he looked at Eleanor, at the bandages on her throat, at the machines keeping her prisoner, at the future Julian had stolen from her. "No." Julian shrugged. "Then I'll shoot the girl first, make you watch. Same thing I did to my brother when he tried to expose us 20 years ago. Same thing I'll do to anyone who threatens what I've built." Thorne stepped forward, pulling out a small remote. "Lila, come to me." Milo's heart stopped. The conditioning, the years of programming, the triggers they'd implanted in her mind like landmines waiting to detonate. Lila's body stiffened, her eyes went glassy. She took one step toward Thorne, then another. "That's right, good girl, you know where you belong." But then Lila smiled, a real smile, fierce, defiant, utterly free, and she tapped her throat 3 times. Click, click, click. Every light in the estate died at once. The monitors, the security systems, the emergency backups, all of it gone in an instant. Milo had spent hours in those service tunnels, hours learning the old irrigation system, the pipes that ran through every wall, the valves he could access without anyone noticing. Gas hissed from the vents, not lethal, just enough to knock out anyone breathing it within seconds. Julian fired blind. The shot went wide. Then he was on the ground, unconscious before he could pull the trigger again. Thorn lasted 3 seconds longer, stumbling towards Lila with desperate hands before collapsing at her feet. Milo grabbed Lila, grabbed Eleanor, and ran. The police arrived 20 minutes later, along with Sarah Chen and a camera crew that broadcast everything live. Julian and Thorn were arrested. The Vesper Institute was raided. Project Larkspur files were seized by federal investigators. For one shining moment, it felt like justice. Eleanor spent 3 months in recovery. Her voice would never sound the same, but she learned to speak again, first in whispers, then in full sentences, then in sworn testimony that put Julian away for life. Lila started therapy, real therapy, with doctors who wanted to help rather than silence. Some days were harder than others. Some nights she still woke up screaming, but she talked now. She laughed now. She was learning, slowly, what it meant to be free. And Milo tried to move on. He found a new job at a community garden, quieter, simpler. No billionaires, no conspiracies, no little girls with terror in their eyes, just dirt under his fingernails and plants that grew because he cared for them. Then the voicemail came.
Mr. Reyes, this is Dr. Howard from the Metropolitan Medical Center. You might not remember me, but I was on Sophia's surgical team. I just saw the news about Project Larkspur, and I need to tell you something. The vocal nerve procedure they used on that girl, it wasn't new. We pioneered it 10 years ago. We called it something different then. We told parents it would prevent post-operative complications. We told them it was safe. A pause. Breathing. You signed the consent form, Mr. Reyes. For Sophia, you authorized the procedure that killed her. I'm sorry. I should have told you years ago. I'm sorry. The voicemail ended. Milo sat in his car for an hour, unable to move. He'd signed the papers. He remembered that. Remembered how tired he was, how grief-stricken from his wife's death just months before, how desperate to believe the doctors knew best. He'd never read the fine print, and somewhere in that fine print was the prototype for Project Larkspur. Sophia hadn't died from negligence. She died from an experiment Milo had authorized without knowing. And when Lila came into his life, mute and suffering from the same technique, he'd thought it was chance, coincidence, a second shot at redemption. But what if it wasn't? What if Julian knew about Sophia? What if he'd hired Milo specifically because of his history? A grieving father, desperate for meaning, with no idea that his pain was connected to the very project he was stumbling toward. The perfect witness, the perfect patsy, the perfect weapon aimed at Julian's enemies without even knowing it. Milo drove to Eleanor and Lila's new house on autopilot. They lived in a small cottage now, far from Blackthorn's shadow, safe, anonymous, happy, or trying to be. Lila ran to him when he arrived, hugging his waist like he was her favorite person in the world. "You saved us," she said. "Mom says you're a hero." Milo forced himself to smile, forced himself to hug her back, forced himself to say the right words and make the right expressions and pretend his entire understanding of the past 3 years hadn't just collapsed like a house of cards. Then he noticed something on the windowsill. A single blackthorn rose, blooming in December, out of season, impossible unless someone had cultivated it, unless someone had put it there deliberately. Beneath the rose was a note, expensive paper, elegant handwriting. Julian's handwriting.
You were always part of the garden, Milo. Even the weeds have roots. Outside, a black sedan idled at the curb. The same black sedan that had followed him for weeks, that had appeared in his rearview mirror, that he'd thought he'd finally escaped. The engine purred like a predator waiting to strike. Milo's hands shook. He thought about calling the police, thought about running, thought about grabbing Lila and Eleanor and driving until the road ended and the ocean began. But instead, he just stood there, watching the rain streak down the window, wondering if he'd ever really had a choice at all. He'd given them their voices back, but his own? Maybe it had never belonged to him in the first place. The sedan pulled away slowly, disappearing into the storm, and the rain kept falling on the rose, washing nothing clean, just waiting for the next silence to begin. If this story got under your skin, if you're still thinking about that blackthorn rose and what it means, then do me a favor, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you think Julian's final plan really was. Did Milo win, or was he played from the beginning? And subscribe if you haven't already, because stories like this one are exactly what this channel is about. Real twists, real emotions, real endings that don't let you sleep easy. I'll see you in the next one.